Hello, history enthusiasts. Welcome back to another episode of our deep dives into the past. I'm Hari.
And I'm Kimi. Today, we are traveling back to the 9th century, exploring the misty landscapes of southeast Wales. Our focus is a ruler with a name that perfectly evokes the medieval era, Meurig ab Arthfael. In Old Welsh, you might see him recorded as Meurig.
If you think modern administrative borders are confusing, wait until you hear about the geopolitical map of early Wales. Back in the 7th century, southeast Wales was dominated by a single, unified kingdom called Gwent. But by the time Meurig took the throne around 848, things had splintered.
Right, the region was divided. We have Glywysing, which we now know as Glamorgan, holding a higher status, and a smaller eastern Gwent, which roughly corresponds to modern Monmouthshire. The big debate among modern historians is where Meurig's authority actually lay. Was he the king of Glywysing with power over the whole southeast, or was his rule confined strictly to Gwent?
It's a classic academic standoff. Thomas Charles Edwards argues that the old Gwent split, with Glywysing's ruler acting as an overking, meaning Meurig ruled both. Wendy Davies suggests Gwent remained unified but under the name Glywysing, with junior kings in the smaller Gwent. Meanwhile, Patrick Sims Williams essentially says both theories might just be different ways of describing the exact same reality.
Which is a very polite way of saying we might never know for sure. What we do know is that Meurig's sons, Brockfile and Fernfile, were definitely only kings of the smaller Gwent. They actually had to answer to their cousin, Hywel ap Rhys, who was the king of Glywysing. That must have made for some incredibly awkward family gatherings.
Imagine the jealousy. Now, listeners might wonder how on earth we know any of this. Our primary window into Meurig's reign is a 12th century compilation called the Book of Llandaff. For a long time, historians dismissed this book as a complete work of fiction, full of forged land grants created by greedy monks.
And they weren't entirely wrong. There are definitely some fraudulent documents in there. But in the 1970s, Wendy Davies did a brilliant reassessment. She proved that if you peel back the medieval fabrications, many of the underlying charters are genuine, even if they are frustratingly undated. Plus, they refer to multiple men named Meurig, making it a real puzzle.
Fortunately, we have external confirmation. Assur, the famous scholar who wrote the biography of Alfred the Great in 893, explicitly mentions Brockfale and Fernfale, sons of Meurig and kings of Gwent. We also have a genuine charter where Meurig grants land and lists his sons as witnesses. It's incredibly satisfying when different historical puzzle pieces lock together.
It really is. Now, let's talk about how Meurig got the crown. According to the Harleian genealogies, his father was Arthfael ap Rhys. Meurig likely succeeded his second cousin, Ithil ab Athrys, who died in battle in 848. Ithil was apparently the last of his direct line, which opened the door for Meurig. But what Meurig did once he was on the throne is what truly sets him apart.
Exactly. The 9th century was notorious for lawlessness, where kings and local lords wielded arbitrary power without much regard for the law. But Meurig seems to have been a rare exception. Around the year 850, he issued charters demanding that all churches be freed from any obligations to laymen.
He was essentially trying to carve out a safe haven for the church, protecting ecclesiastical property from the grasping hands of local warlords. While he couldn't stop the trend entirely, kings were still trading church lands centuries later. It shows a remarkable attempt to establish some rule of law.
And we have specific records of his generosity. In 868, Meurig surrendered the church at Trileg to Bishop Caranir. He also acted as a royal guarantor for other people's donations. In one charter, a layman named Fau gave the church of Kilpeck, along with its land, to Bishop Grecielus, and Meurig guaranteed the transaction. In another, a man named Quincum returned a church called Cumoric to the same bishop.
There is also a fascinating discrepancy in the records regarding a place called Llan Macha, or St. Moggins. In one charter version, Meurig consents to a grant of Llan Macha to Archbishop Defrig's church, but in another version, he guarantees the grant of Llan Bocha to Bishop Grecielus. Historians are still scratching their heads over which version is the real deal.
A classic medieval administrative mix-up. Now, the mystery doesn't stop there. We also don't agree on when Meurig died. The Welsh annals record deaths of kings named Meurig in both 849 and 874. Some scholars think he died in 849, but that would make his reign extremely brief and wouldn't align with his later charters. Wendy Davies argues forcefully for 874, using the timeline of charter witnesses to back up her claim. If she is right, it means Meurig had a solid 26-year reign. Sadly, his dynasty didn't last very long after him. His royal line seems to have ended with his son Arthfael in the early 10th century. There's a theory by Peter Bartram that a later 10th century king, Noe ap Gwiriad, might have been a descendant through a grandson named Gwiriad, but most historians consider Noe's ancestry a complete mystery.
It's amazing how much trauma, politics, and mystery can be packed into a few surviving medieval charters. Meurig ab Arthfael was a ruler trying to bring stability to a turbulent age, and his legacy still echoes through the Welsh landscape today.
It absolutely does. Thank you all so much for joining us on this historical journey. We hope you enjoyed learning about Meurig as much as we did. Stay curious, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
This episode is based on the Wikipedia article Meurig ab Arthfael, which is available under the Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike license. This podcast was crafted using artificial intelligence.